there.
Hello.
I'm Mary Liz. I work with Kate, the Now and There team.
How's it going? Alex, Allston Village Main Streets.
Nice to see you. Thanks for being with us.
No problem.
Wow. You guys are so prompt.
I love to be on time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oof.
It's like, it's a major success to be on time. It's like one of those things.
Especially as someone who works in the arts, no one else is ever on time. So
No, you definitely stand out that way.
when I was in a band, I used to tell them 30 minutes earlier than I actually wanted them to be there, because otherwise they would be late.
My family's a bunch of artists, and that was always my same trick.
Mm.
But still, we would show up for things at like the hour after, you know, when the season switched, you know. So like band practice, whatever, it was like, oh, spring forward, not back. Katie, how are you feeling today?
I'm doing all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you sick?
That means you're like alive. Okay.
Yeah, that means I'm like alive. I was not feeling great yesterday. I actually managed to go to my optometrist, and apparently I have been wearing the super wrong prescription for like several months. Yeah. So my vision, but I saw her in January, and she's like, guess what? Your prescription changed again. So
Yikes.
I ordered.
There's Ross.
Like,
Ross, you're in the dark.
Really?
I wonder if it's
There
from
you go. Yeah, hi.
on a screen all the time.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Yeah.
She was like, it could be a couple of things. It could be like being on a screen more. So it could be that for sure. But I have spiffy new glasses coming soon. So
Yay.
that's fun.
Did you get a new look?
Yeah, they're like the clear glasses that are really trendy.
Oh,
I don't
cool.
know. They were like, they can get here quickly. And I was like, that's all I care about.
Warby Parker, there you go, huh? Kate,
I'm into.
Kate,
Yeah.
you get those photographs I sent of it actually I think it might be a good way to introduce a younger generation of Allston.
How so? Your photographs?
It's a project I did at the Ed Portal. I've done it for 3 years with high school kids making banners that we've hung up around Allston, and the text on them is actually quite thoughtful.
Here we go. Okay, I just got them now. Do you have those pictures of the Greenway?
Oh, you had those from before, right?
No, I didn't get those either.
Oh.
I haven't received any pictures from you. Have you, Katie?
Huh.
I did not, no.
Well, that's weird. How did you see them? Because I sent them all out to you. Huh.
You just showed them on your screen on Monday.
Yeah, I think I saw a few of your pictures, Ross, that you emailed.
Oh, maybe you got them and I didn't.
Huh. Let me see.
I'm downloading these now that you sent over. These are great. Where were these installed?
They were in the along Western Avenue, right on the edge of Allston and Brighton.
Uh-huh.
And it's high school kids from Brighton High School, and also some junior high school kids from the Gardner School, and
Probably recognize them then, because I live on that street. So
yeah. And I think the text that they put in was quite thoughtful and kind of lovely.
All right, they are on my desktop, ready to be pulled up.
But let me see why you didn't get all this other stuff. Oh, yeah, you got it.
I'll check spam.
No. I'll say it again.
Alex, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I had to pay off $1,400 worth of car repairs yesterday, but stick and move, you know.
what kind of car do you have?
I've got a 08 Nissan Altima Coupe, so nice and zippy. It's manual, but yeah, I just brought it to the mechanic for a quick tune-up, and they're like, "Oh, this, and this is wrong with it." So, what are you gonna do?
Mechanic, where do you go?
I live in Somerville, so there's a
Oh, okay.
mechanic like down the street. You know, I trust them, but you know, what are
I
you
used to
gonna
go to this great mechanic.
Signs on Cambridge Street. They're always really good.
Yeah. I should have gotten a second opinion, but it was too late.
Hey, Kate,
Yeah.
First car I
I
drove.
sent you 2 other photographs of a project that was done by BU students without asking permission, and the neighbors really complained, and they actually got the city to come and clean it off.
Ooh, look at that.
That's
Okay.
another thing that happens a lot in the neighborhood because people think, oh, there's students here, let's do a cool project. So it probably, cost the city more than the students' tuition did. I mean, they had 2 guys out there with pressure washers for a day.
That is ridiculous.
So it was done without checking in with any neighbors. It was a sort of decorative thing. It didn't have much meaning anyway.
Yeah, it's just stencils.
Oh, Christine, I meant to say this on Monday. I know somebody that went to my high school that now writes for Allston Pudding. Do you know?
Bork, right?
Yeah, Andrew Bork. Yeah.
Yeah, he mentioned that that you guys are friends.
Yeah, we grew up together. We went to Costa Rica together like
Ha.
9 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't met him in real life yet because we've been doing all of our Allston Pudding stuff virtually, but he's nice.
Right. Yeah, small world.
Yep.
Ross, I can't find the photos. I checked spam.
I'll just send a couple more of them again.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
So I've got a quick logistical question.
Mhm.
After like the initial 30-minute conversation, when we do like open-ended questions, is it going to be like, are these questions going to be curated by you guys, or is it just going to be anybody that wants to ask a question can pop up and start talking?
Good question. So we ask that folks who want to ask questions use the Q&A feature rather than chat. And that lets us, 1, vet the question a little bit, and 2, it lets me know that they're willing to get on live and ask the question with their voice, which we find is really a lot more engaging to just add people's voices in rather than me just like reading questions. Occasionally, if we're slow on questions and some topic has come up in the chat, I will pull one out of chat and ask it, or ask that person if they would like to ask it live. But some of those questions that come up in chat are really like more for conversation than for you all. So I keep a running tally, and so does Kate. We all sort of manage the chat because it can get kind of hairy in there. To see if
Fun,
there's anything.
hairy.
Yes, not weird, just like a lot to go through. So it's mostly if somebody has a question, we let them ask. We don't do too much curation or gatekeeping on it. But occasionally something will come in that's like really off topic, and I'll respond that we'll be in touch with them outside of this, or sometimes things come in really late and we can't get to everything. Like the last question I can ask is usually at about 1:24. And after that, like, there's more time for questions.
And Mary Liz does a really good job of pointing the question to one of you first. Occasionally it's a question for me, and those are always the hardest ones. So I don't know if you saw the sort of timeline at the top of the set of questions, but I will start with a little bit of reading, an introduction to the program, a land acknowledgement. I'll introduce you guys, and then we'll go right into the questions. Hopefully this by 12:35. And we do start right on time at 12:30. Mary Liz will start letting people in a couple minutes before, because my speech is my speech, and it doesn't matter if people have heard it a gazillion times. So anyone late is going to come in right as you guys start talking. And then the weirdest part is like, we just had this like really great intimate like exchange, and then I go, goodbye. and then that's it.
I was in a meeting recently where instead of like the awkward lingering, everybody saying goodbye, we all just screamed at the same time.
I love that.
It was interesting. I didn't participate because I know if I started screaming, my dog would freak out. But
yeah. What if everyone played their favorite song at the same time?
My last name, it's like Varriale.
Oh, thank you.
It's like the
say
R.
that again?
Varriale.
Varriale.
So like the 2 R's kind of make them more like a D. It's like a R/D.
Varriale.
Yeah.
Varriale?
Yeah.
Vade.
Is that
It's like
Italian?
the rolled
Yeah,
R, right?
What?
No, she says more of a hard R.
Yeah, it's not rolled like a Spanish double R. It's harder.
Varriale. Sorry, say that again. To close my eyes.
Varriale.
One more time.
Varriale.
Varriale.
Yeah.
Variale.
Yeah.
Variale.
Yeah, I know. It's the least phonetic thing ever.
Variale. Variale.
Honestly, I'm used to anyone saying it anyway, so if it's not 100%, I forgive you.
I might just stop and you can correct me. Variale.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh,
Pretty good. Okay. Variale. Thank you for that. Variale.
I've debated just like using my mom's maiden name or something, but even hers, like people can't figure out how to say right. So
What is that?
It's Bligh, Bligh, like Captain.
Oh, yeah.
But like people see it and they're like Blige,
Oh,
which isn't right either.
no.
So
Like Mary Blige. Mary.
yeah, they think that. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Love her, but different family.
Okay. Alex Cornacchini.
Perfect.
Okay.
First try.
Ross Miller. Okay.
Pretty hard.
Also, when other panelists are talking, would you like us to mute ourselves?
Kate, you're muted.
I know. And if you're going for a long time, I'm gonna turn my mute off and start making a little bit of noise as a signal. It's gonna be challenging. We have so many questions and 3 of you, so we'll keep moving as fast as we can.
How many people is it usually, you think?
Katie can tell us exactly how many have registered. It's usually between 30 and 80.
I think we had 40 people registered as of this meeting.
Okay, that's kind of low.
Yeah, we had also sent out a bunch of emails to people in the Allston area, so it's possible that we'll have a couple of people drop in.
I was actually on a Zoom call with the woman from the Ed portal. Forgetting her name now.
Is it Falana?
No.
It's the person who took over for Eva, right?
Yeah. She couldn't come, but Falana is coming, I heard.
I know that Bree, I'm forgetting her last name, but
Edwards?
from the art, from Harvard Art had registered a while back. Yeah, we had 49 registrants now.
Tony from the ACA sent it out earlier today too. I saw that.
Oh, great. Ross, thank you for these pictures. Let me get these ready. Do you have the flipboard?
That I'm standing. I don't like sitting. Can't do it.
Oh, I can't think when I sit.
Kate, I sent you again that original thing when it was on the Greenway.
Yeah.
And then when it got dumped in Allston, and then it's been actually morphed. So it's actually kind of a more wonderful project.
All right.
Is that the one by the footbridge?
Yeah.
Love it.
Where it now says, it said for a while rats are people too, and now it says Black Lives Matter. It was a kind of stupid text piece on the Greenway that was, I don't know, $20,000 for some artist who does things like that.
They were like from New York or Chicago or something too.
Yeah, Matthew. Yeah.
I loved when it said rats are people. That was sick. And then obviously like making it Black Lives Matter is great too.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful, and that's Galen Mook, the bicycle activist, who's been doing that mostly.
Yeah, Matthew Hoffman originally did it.
Yeah.
2017. Ross,
that's the public art that doesn't offend people but has a little bit of an edge, right?
Oh wow, we're at time. We've got people coming in. Awesome. All right, everyone ready to go?
Yep.
Mary Liz? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to the Now and There Asks conversation series. I'm Kate Gilbert. I use she, her as my pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Now and There. I'll be moderating our conversation, and today is our 6th of 8 sessions of Now and There Asks, where we ask Boston communities, what does your neighborhood need right now? Today's session brings us to Allston, also referred to as Rock City, Rat City, Little Cambridge, maybe someday Art City. Today we're excited to have with us local artist Ross Miller, Executive Director of Allston Village Main Streets, Alex Cornacchini, and Christine Varriale. Oh my gosh, I totally got it wrong. Varriale. Can you help me out?
Varriale.
Varriale from Allston Pudding. Varriale. Before we formally begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm standing here today in Boston, Massachusetts, on the unceded land of the Massachusetts people. And as we talk about Allston today, we acknowledge the Massachusetts people, past, present, and future. This program has been created to offer a supportive and proactive space for artists, cultural producers, community leaders, the public, all of you, all of us, in the face of physical distancing and public retreat. We aim to bring together all of you to open up a dialogue about what's happening right now in Boston's neighborhoods to be better listeners and encourage action. We'll start with a 30-minute conversation that I'll moderate, followed by 30 minutes of community dialogue with you, moderated by Mary Liz Murray. And we want to include your voices. So as questions come up, please add them to the Q&A feature and let Mary Liz know if you want to ask your question live. We really like to get your voice on live. If not, she will ask the question for you. And I see some chat going on. Please make sure to use the chat, or you don't have to, but we'd love you to use the chat to share your thoughts, your reactions, snaps, thumbs up, links, other things that you want to contribute to the conversation and to connect with one another. Please make sure that the chat, you've selected all panelists and attendees so that everyone hears a response, not just those on the screen. So let's get started with the tough question of what does Allston need right now, and a quick introduction to our guests. Ross Miller is an artist who works to integrate art into public places and everyday experiences. Ross earned his bachelor's degree at Harvard University and would later go on to become a Loeb Fellow at Harvard. You might recognize his twinkling winter lights that go up every year around the city, especially in downtown Crossing, his work Harbor Fog and the Rose Kennedy Greenway, or from the annual installation of his ancient fishweir project on the Boston Common, which seeks to expand the time frame of history told in Boston's public spaces and honor the memory of Boston's early native inhabitants. Christine Varriale, close, is the editor-in-chief at Allston Pudding, a blog for Boston music aficionados. Christine received her Bachelor of Science from Bentley University and went on to begin writing for Allston Pudding shortly after. In 2015, she was made editor-in-chief of the online publication. Allston Pudding is operated and written by fans and musicians to highlight new and live music in Boston and throughout the globe. They seek to champion local artists, wherever they may be, who may not receive a proper radio play or publicity, but definitely deserve your attention. Last but not least, Alex Cornacchini has served as the Executive Director of Allston Village Main Street since August of 2019. I'm sure you've seen a lot of change since then. Alex is a graduate of American University with experience in community outreach, neighborhood revitalization, and program development. Alex enjoys being outside, traveling, and meeting new people. Again, probably harder to do in these days. And just for background, Allston Village Main Streets is one of the 20 Main Streets organizations in Boston that works with the community and local businesses to create, build, and sustain healthy commercial districts by creating programs that foster economic and social development. So let's dive in. Thank you guys again for being part of this and showing up here for Now and There Asks. This is our 6th session so far, and what I'm observing Allston is facing is the same as many of the other neighborhoods we've been exploring this series. In particular, gentrification and increased real estate prices that are driving out our small independent stores and cultural venues. For Christine and Ross, you both have very different art forms and ways that you support the art forms that you're in. how is what you're doing changing because of these economic pressures and maybe amplified because of COVID? What can we do now to keep art as a vital part of Allston? And Christine, why don't we start with you if you're game for that?
Always game.
Thanks.
So I think a lot of the immediate issues about art right now in Allston are related to COVID. So a lot of what we do at Allston Pudding is around live shows, and those can't happen right now, and we don't exactly know when they can come back. So we're sort of trying to figure out how we keep our music community together while apart. We've done a lot of live streams and done what we can to sort of like uplift voices of people who need the most help right now. A lot of that. And then, like Kate mentioned, gentrification and greedy developers are also a huge part in this. We just lost Great Scott in Allston, which is a longtime music venue and bar, and is a pivotal part of our music scene. Places like Cantab Lounge and Central Square, and like how much of the development that's going up isn't built for people like myself and musicians and artists that are in our neighborhood to live in because we can't afford it. I'll let Ross go now.
Most of my work is public art in physical places. It often takes years and years to do. In Allston, where my studio is, partly because it was a great place to find a studio 20 years ago, and years before that I was in a rental space on Rugg Road. My work in the neighborhood has been both with the Schoolyard Initiative, designing outdoor classrooms and using sculptural pieces as part of the schoolyard and how you get kids learning to take place outside. And I've done a number of projects with the Harvard Ed Portal with, again, students at high schools, things like that. And I'm not necessarily trying to advocate for that whole practice of working with students or working with kids, but I have a couple projects that I've been involved with, I think, that do speak to the voice of a new generation of Allston youth. And Kate, maybe we could show some of those later on. I'm also fascinated because public art is being used in Allston, sometimes paid for by developers, sometimes paid for by Harvard, as a way of having a little mitigation for very large things they're doing. This is a project that I did, actually sponsored by the Ed Portal. It was just after one of the school shootings, so this was one of the banners that kids made. We took existing banners for other events and we reprimed them with white paint and then painted them, and the kids really expressed themselves. Does it matter if I'm happy? I mean, they were very poignant projects. So I was pretty excited. Harvard has been the big elephant in Allston, but Harvard actually sponsored that project, which was kind of awesome. But it didn't happen this year. The outdoor classroom stuff didn't happen this year. The schoolyard stuff didn't happen this year. One thing that did happen, some artists and other people developed a whole pollinator garden along Everett Street. So there are lots of little things happening which aren't exactly actually artwork in the traditional way, but maybe in the way that Joseph Beuys, who was a artist who came out of the Second World War Germany, when the artists were feeling both the guilt of the Second World War and the stress of it, and he developed the idea of social sculpture. And social sculpture is something that actually has values placed in the work. So it might not look like an artwork that you see on the wall, but it's a making of something in a physical place that combines craft, values, and the people in that area. So I'm hoping to, in some ways, work in that tradition rather than other traditions in public art.
Christine, I want to just kick it back over to you, just to if there are any new experimental forms that you're seeing. And yes, we're all sort of doing online Zoom, but does that work in a recording or musical fashion?
I feel like I've seen that just a lot of people are giving themselves more room for experimentation in their music because they're home alone. They're not necessarily doing it to perform for other people. A lot of the music that I've heard coming out of these like self-isolating times these days is a lot more personal. Some of it is a lot more political as well, with the uprisings going around the country around police brutality and racism. So I've seen a lot of great stuff come from that, and a lot of people sort of like band together more, even though we're physically apart, to sort of work together for the greater good.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that, and spoken with a lot of people who are, at this time, especially artists, taking a moment to heal and listen, and this experimentation that's happening right now, I think could be pretty fruitful. Alex, moving it over to you now. You're as a Main Streets public art or art isn't necessarily part of what you're doing, but I'm curious if you think that. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing around the issues of gentrification and support for small businesses, and then if you want, is art part of your mission?
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Glad to see all of you. So the mission of Allston Village Main Streets since its inception in '96 has been to work together to make Allston a safe, thriving, friendly business district, to promote the area, make it cleaner, greener, more pedestrian oriented, and to help foster cooperation. So a large part of what we work towards is promoting the physical and cultural vitality of the neighborhood. So we've always acted as a support for local artists and entrepreneurs. We've had a number of public and private art projects and event spaces. I'm not sure if you guys remember Pop Allston, but back in 2015, before I joined, we partnered with a number of local businesses and local organizations to build an indoor skate park that featured a vintage clothing market and bike shop, while also making it a community space for pop-up theater production and performances. Currently, we're actually looking for 10 local artists to paint 10 utility boxes in the neighborhood, put up murals on the neighborhood. And we're currently actually working with Ross here and another local artist, Tim Kadish, to install 16 artistic permanent light fixtures on poles right on Harvard Ave. So I see AVMS as kind of the facilitator of art projects. We look for grant opportunities, find local artists that are willing and interested in working on projects, and we work with city departments to get permits and pull permits and get approvals, and kind of really do the behind the scenes work so that these projects can be successful. So technically, we work for the local businesses, making the area more viable and more attractive. So businesses want to stay here and people want to come live and work and play here. But a large part of the vibrancy of the neighborhood is these design projects. So with the lighting projects, we've hired local artists to paint murals. We're doing a utility box project. These are all not exactly the main focus of our organization, but it's one key feature of our organization.
Ross, can I kick it over to you? You and I have talked in the past about our skepticism around public art at times. And you've given us some examples of works that aren't sanctioned necessarily and what they've done to sort of highlight who Allston is right now. Can you give us some of those again? Or for those who weren't on the pre-call, your opinions on all this?
Maybe shape the question a little bit more. I'm trying to think of what
examples of non-sanctioned public art that didn't come out of Alex's office or now and there, or the city.
You want to pop up those ones. So there was a project that was done on the Greenway that was paid for by the Greenway Conservancy. They have a whole public art program, and after it was on the Greenway, they didn't have any place to put it, so they moved it to a fence along Everett Street in Allston, and it never made much sense to the neighborhood, and nobody was really asked about why to put it there. But it's a series of letters that are bolted onto a chain link fence, and they're not easy to put on or put off because you have to be on either side of the fence. You have to have wrenches and bolts and things like that. And it sat there for about a year, and then a couple of activists in the neighborhood who were really more bicycle activists, like they just started hacking that existing piece of public art. Go up to the top, go to the middle one. So that's what it looked like when it was first put up. And then the third photograph down, that was the first hack to it, Rats Are People Too. And then just about 3 weeks ago, the top one, the same letters were morphed. And so you actually have to have somebody on one side of the fence and the other side of the fence and do this. So it's actually kind of exciting when things that are just there, almost like this kit of parts, and people are playing with it. So I think that's a kind of the spirit of a certain level of the Allston neighborhood. And it's still inexpensive enough that people can live in a group house and not have, have to spend all their time making their living and do things like this. There are also projects where, because it is a student neighborhood and BUs down the street and Boston colleges like that, the universities do put a little bit of money into public art, but also sometimes teachers at universities send their students in to do something. And this is in a little park along Franklin Street where students did this decorative project. I'm not against decoration, but they actually didn't talk to anybody in the neighborhood. They just did it. And partly because they just did it, the neighborhood was going like, what is this? It has no meaning, and why are these marks there? So they finally got a hold of the local rep and got a hold of the Public Works Department, and two guys from the Public Works Department spent a day power washing this off. So I think when something is meaningless, people in the neighborhood also say, hey, we don't want that meaningless thing. Whereas those letters that now say Black Lives Matter, and for a while said Rats Are People Too, have been there and they're fine, and there's a little bit more graffiti on them, but they're actually cared for by the neighborhood. So there are a lot of these little mini barometers, which are flexible public art projects that I'm really excited to be in a neighborhood that has that, and that the people who, it's a working class neighborhood, it's a middle class neighborhood. In many ways, the artists are also middle class artists. They're not, they're people either have gotten out of school recently, mass art or museum school, and moved into the neighborhood, or artists who've been there for a long time. So it doesn't really represent a big class diversity per se, and it doesn't really represent a lot of ethnic diversity per se in the maker community, in the artist maker community. But I think that community is concerned about the larger culture in some good ways. And that given that sort of, I guess, middle class nature of it, the number of the artists that I know, visual artists, not musical artists, but visual artists, are recognizing this is a crazy pandemic time for a lot of people, but themselves are actually, I hate to say it, kind of enjoying it because they're reclusive. They don't necessarily like to interact with people a lot. They like to be in their studio working. And so in many ways, there's less stress to be out and do things. And I think it's a very creative time right now for artists who have been working for home their entire life. And now it's kind of, they don't have to feel bad about it. They actually feel more entitled to do it.
They can do their work. The other thing that I've observed is maybe because of the student body, and I just found a statistic this morning, I think it's 78% of Allston residents, and this might be from 2015, are between the ages of 18 and like 34. And I see a lot of activism that's happening. And maybe Christine, you can fill us in on some of the many groups that you've been working with, and where they're being successful and maybe where they're not. And I can pull up some links to them as you talk.
For now, I'm still in that group. Yes, the 18 to 34. Got a few more years. Do you mean like civic groups or art groups, or?
The civic groups that you're involved with.
Got it. So I'm a voting member of the Allston Civic Association, which is a great neighborhood group that sort of encompasses people of all walks of life in the Allston neighborhood. We meet once a month, and developers who have projects, whether it's commercial or residential or like it's, a restaurant, a liquor store, etc., will come to the meeting and present as a way to get support from the neighborhood before they go to places like the Zoning Board of Appeal or the Boston Civic Design Committee. I'm not sure if I actually got that acronym right, but it's definitely BCDC. So it's a good opportunity to get your voice heard by these developers, to make sure that those developments fit in what you believe the future of our neighborhood should look like. And there's not very many young people in the group, and myself and some other of my friends have worked really hard to try to get those numbers of younger people, people of color, et cetera, involved in those conversations, because there's definitely a lack of those voices in the room. So that's a big group that I'm part of, that I love being a part of. I also am a member of Artist Impact, which is an artist civic group that some friends of mine started about 2 years ago. And so we specifically focus on those same developer aspects, but through the lens of working artists in our neighborhood.
And you guys are working on some impact guidelines, right? Is there anything that you can leak to us?
I mean, we are trying to help the city with some guidelines, but I wouldn't say that we have the power to change them just on our own. But we do have connections to the city and BPDA, et cetera, that we can voice our ideas to help them. We talk as small groups with different developers to sort of help them become more artist friendly, I guess I would say. A lot of that focuses foremost on the affordability of the building. Most of the stuff that gets proposed in Allston isn't affordable to your regular working class artists. I think I saw Ethan post the median income of the neighborhood in the chat. Like, that's pretty spot on for what an artist would make who lives in this neighborhood. So pushing to get apartments that they can actually afford in those buildings is like the highest win. And then on top of that, like, can we get them to commit to live workspace? So something, that like somebody like Ross could use, where, they don't have to pay the extra money to get a studio when they could have a large enough apartment with all of the stuff that they would need to work like in their home.
Right. Because let's face it, you can't work and live in any space in Boston anymore. I mean,
yeah.
If I can interject, I was down there in Lower Allston / Brighton off of Western Ave in 1999, and the house was for sale for $220,000, a full.
Sounds like a deal right now.
That would be, over 600,000 now.
Yeah.
There was something you said about like, we don't have the power. I mean, you didn't quite say that, but I was on the phone with some city officials yesterday, and they reminded me that we elect them. And so we do have power, and we need to vote, and we need to, call the BPDA and ask who's sitting there, and how old they are and what their ethnicities are. And I know you guys have strong city council representation too. Alex, I wanted to go ahead.
Liz Braden's a good advocate for the arts, and I know her from affordable housing advocacy that we've worked on together. So I'm always, picking her brain with my ideas and stuff. And it's nice to have that really open communication with her and other city councilors and state reps, et cetera. So
great. So we're not gonna stop development. This is the world. It keeps moving along. There was something that you guys brought up at our last call, thinking about, and I experienced this when I was at the Greenway. A luxury condo comes in, and it's in front of an open space, or it's across a bar that's been there, or a music venue for ages and ages. Alex, can you remind me the name of the I think change agent or something like that?
It was the agent of change policy, and I think Christine brought it up, so she might be more adept at discussing it. But I think, with all of these new developments and kind of higher income level apartment buildings and condos coming into Allston, we need to think about preserving the establishments that have been here for 10, 20, 30 years. For example, if there was a new development right across from, let's say, the Model down in Union Square in Allston Village, and they didn't like the fact that the Model was operating until 2 a.m., people from a more higher income bracket would be able to, you know, complain to zoning boards, complain to city officials, and kind of get them to change their ways. So this agent of change policy would kind of let these already established institutions be preserved in how they do business.
So last question before we kick it over to Q&A and bring in audience and participant voices. Again, going back to the statistics, while Allston has a lot of different ethnicities, it's still predominantly white. In the last BPDA 2015 publication, it showed 57% white, 20% Asian, 13% Hispanic, 5% African American, and 5% other. I'd love to hear how you guys are, and you can answer this in any way you want, either individually or as your business or as a collective, reconciling, responding to, and otherwise recognizing the inequalities that keep Black and brown artists from having the same experiences that, you know, us as white-facing presenting artists have had, especially those in Allston. Anyone can start this off.
I mean, I often hire people part-time, seasonally, to work on things, and I've actually kind of gone out of my way at different times to have African American, Indian, continent of India, and Hispanic sort of artists when I have a choice of people to bring into the studio. But that's very small, you know. That's just a little bit of stuff of hiring people. If I can zoom back for a second to Christine, I'd just like to say that what Christine's talking about in terms of its advocacy and being on the Allston Civic Association board and all that sort of stuff is really essential and fantastic. So thank you, Christine. And I actually my concern is like how to this stuff is happening so fast. How do we act on sort of an urgency? Because this really is an urgency to deal with these buildings, because there's, you know, you go to these Allston Civic Association meetings and there's the architect, the developer, a lawyer, their PR person, and actually in the audience of the room, they're members of their sort of, you know, legal team. And so it's really outnumbering. In some ways, going on to Zoom meetings has been better because more people are able to show up. And the chat bar of some of these meetings, you know, rather than whispering to your neighbor and saying, what's going on with this guy? The chat bar has all that stuff in it, and it's recorded. So I think actually Zoom is really helping otherwise unheard voices get a little bit more stature in things like the Allston Civic Association. It seems like a new kind of democracy. So I'm sort of excited about that. But I would really like to just try to figure out how we can all kind of embody the urgency of some of these issues. Doing more now is going to be better than doing less 2 years from now, or more 2 years from now. I mean, they're urgent things, and I think there's a time to be creative in a way that doesn't trash development, but really looks at quality of life.
This is a moment in time.
I also want to piggyback on that and double down on the urgency of this. I know that Allston Village isn't as developed as of yet as Lower Allston, but I think I counted it like a few months ago, and there was 17 projects in various stages of development in and around the Allston Village neighborhood. So in the next 5-10 years, we're going to see this place change dramatically. And one of the things that I was most impressed about the neighborhood is the amount of advocacy and groups and committees that there already were in the neighborhood dedicated to, you know, preserving the arts in the neighborhood, working to better the transportation in the neighborhood. I sit on the transportation committee. It's run by Anna Leslie from the Allston Brighton Health Collaborative. Quick shout out. She's been amazing at organizing people and getting people involved. And ever since mid-March, when COVID actually started, we've been having neighborhood discussions and resource sharing with at least 25 different organizations within the Allston Brighton community. What do people need? What resources do people have? Like, what challenges are we facing? What can we do together? So the more people get involved and the more people sit on the ACA and the more people go to transportation committee meetings and the more people get involved in IAG meetings for specific developments, that's where we can really lead the conversation.
I think IAG should be like voting. Everyone should have to, not voting, like jury duty. Everyone should have to do it.
Exactly.
Christine,
Yeah.
I'm going to give the last couple minutes to you, and then Mary Liz is going to come on for a Q&A.
Yeah, just to keep those ideas rolling, piggyback some more. The BPDA or Boston Planning and Development Agency, in case anyone on here isn't aware of what they are, they're the ones who, decide what gets built. They put out a report a week ago, July 16th, so barely a week ago, and it showed the approved residential square footage by neighborhood just in 2019 alone. Allston's was 1.3 million square feet. It's higher than the sum of the next 3 neighborhoods of development, which are underneath it, which is West Roxbury, Fenway, and East Boston. It's like absurd the amount of square foot that has been approved in our neighborhood. And so making sure that people are at those meetings is so important, because like, what are those 1.3 million square feet going to look like? Who's going to be living there? Like, we need to make sure that our neighbors can afford those things, that we are not pushing out low income immigrant neighbors and their businesses. Because I mean, that's a lot of what Allston Village Main Street does, is, support small businesses, and we need to keep them here, because like, even though there will be more people living in the neighborhood, what's our neighborhood going to look like? Like, it's cool to live here, but if Great Scott closes, Azama just got bought out by a new owner, like if all these different businesses get bought out and turned into condos, there's nothing to do anymore. Like, there's no reason to stay here. So we need to have the people on those impact advisory groups, like in those meetings, to make sure that our neighborhood, stays vital and vibrant and exciting. And just another thing, like, I agree with Ross about having the meetings on Zoom, making it so much more accessible, because a big thing that I notice at these meetings is they're either people my age, where we don't have family responsibilities because we don't have families, we're just young, or they're like older retired folks, again, don't have very much family responsibilities. There's very few people who are like, working parents there, because they have to be at home feeding their kids. So it's like, how do we make these meetings more accessible to those people who can't afford the childcare to go to the meetings? Can we provide them food? Can we provide them childcare there for free? Things like that would be awesome for the city to look into. And then, like, in terms of personal Allston Pudding stuff, we've been having a lot of discussions about making our staff, more diverse, getting more diverse voices at the table. We are majority white, just like our neighborhood. So we're looking at ways that we can work to better that, to get more diverse voices on our site, and continue to cover the various diverse voices in our city, because there's a lot of great music in the city, and it's not just the white indie rock boys anymore. So yeah, that's me.
Just a quick one, if I could. So I kind of like to do a little bit of follow the money thing. If there is this 1 million+ square feet of residential space having in Allston, I mean, they're going to be, the tax rolls are going up, the city is getting more money from this part of town. How can that money be sent back in a more equitable way into different parts of Allston? I mean, it's like a no-brainer if you look at it economically. The city is, anxious, and actually there's I think a big bias towards supporting development in the city because they know it increases taxes, and yet the other costs of that are again sort of, in the world of bias and things, just ignored. So I think we really need, that's part of the urgency, is like the city is getting great benefit out of this, and we need to direct how that benefit comes back into people who aren't at the table, who don't have a voice, who don't have a lawyer, who don't have an investment fund behind them.
And that'll take a little bit of consensus to go back to the city to ask for what those things are.
I think a lot of people in the neighborhood, even the old time Irish neighborhood, they are interested in this. They're not wanting their you know, they're not wanting to get kicked out or having their kids not be able to live in the neighborhood. And there's a lot of voices.
I think we also need to leverage our universities and other nonprofit orgs more in our neighborhood too. There's this thing called Pilot, for those who are unaware. It's called Payment in Lieu of Taxes. And it basically says that if you are a nonprofit organization like a university or a hospital, since you don't pay taxes, you're supposed to put, I think it's 25% of that into community benefits. So 12.5% of that goes towards things like trash pickup and other city services. But the other 12.5% is supposed to go towards the community. And many of the universities, we have Harvard, BU, and BC right in our neighborhood, and none of them pay all of that. So they need to pay more. They need to do better to connect with the community. Like, I know they're trying, but it's still not enough. So I would like to see our universities do more. You know, like Harvard bought out all this land in Lower Allston under all these like fake LLC names for Beacon Yards. And if they don't build substantially affordable housing there, like, we're all going to be very upset. So I think pushing on our universities more and helping them like create a better partnership with their community, with their students themselves too, would be super great. Like, students are in such a bubble at their universities, and it's like, how do we get them to get those students out in their neighborhoods, like learning more about their community and connecting more with the people who have been living here for a while instead of just like the 4 years that they're here.
Yeah. This could be a great place for incubating ideas that could go around the country. I mean, really, it could be incredible to take these opportunities and these problems and turn them into creative methods that could be modeled other places too. But again, it's about the urgency and holding all those people's feet to the fire now.
Yeah. So I'd like to just let everybody know that we're open for questions. If you have questions for any of the panelists, you can submit them through Q&A and we'll bring you into the conversation live. And while we wait for some questions to roll in, one of the questions that is on my mind and part of this conversation is, as we're talking about universities and how much they should be investing in the neighborhood and what they don't, it's also a huge student and recent grad population in Allston, right? But with pandemic, we're looking at potentially seeing a much smaller influx of those students this coming fall. I know BU and BC have both announced that they're going to hold classes online right now, but I think whether or not they're actually able to do that is still sort of up for debate. So Alex, I'm going to ask you this question first, actually, because I think you're in an interesting position to answer it as somebody who sits in the business community that serves students and residents, longer term residents, people who've been there a long time, as well as less transient populations. If students don't return in the same numbers they usually do in the fall, what are the impacts and some of the changes that you're anticipating? And how are you sort of planning for those things? What do they mean for the other people who live in the neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's on the back of everyone's mind. A lot of the local businesses in the Allston area cater directly to students. And there's a lot of businesses that are immigrant-run businesses that cater towards different sects of student population. So I'm really glad that the White House's order on the ban of students from coming to the United States if they're taking online classes, I'm glad that's gone, because that would have been detrimental to our local businesses. So while I've seen a decrease in the amount of students in the neighborhood, I do believe that since Boston College, maybe Boston University, said they might bring students back, Harvard's planning on bringing around 40% of students back, and most students from the business community. I think it might be okay, but it's still not going to be as populated with students as we used to be. And that means that a lot of the businesses won't have as many customers as they used to. So we're trying to teach businesses new ways to get customers. So getting online finding ways to do virtual business and stuff like that. So we don't really know as of right now, but it's definitely going to be a big change.
Ross, I'm wondering from the artist's perspective and as somebody who's worked with students and seen student art happen in the neighborhood, what kind of changes you think there are sort of like in terms of neighborhood identity and culture that could happen if students don't return in the same way? And if you think that change is likely to be temporary, or is it possible that we're seeing a longer term shift?
You know, in the particular little lower Allston neighborhood that I'm in, a lot of student leases go from September to September. So people have leases through September. They kind of don't want to go back to where their parents are or someplace else. So I think a lot of those student or recent graduates are still around. It's, you know, musicians, artists who are just getting going on things. So I think so I haven't seen a real big shift that way on the street in terms of who's walking down the street, who's riding their bicycle down the street. So I guess the question is what's going to happen in September with those leases turning over. From just my conversations, I think a lot of people want to stay here. You know, they don't want to go someplace else. It's a better place to shelter in place than any place else. You know, if you come from some other place in the country, you still got your community around. So
if you can pay the rent, right?
Huh?
So is that if you can pay the rent? Because lots of students who rent are paying it on student loans.
Yeah, no, it's a yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think September is going to look a lot different around here.
Not gonna be an Allston Christmas anymore, huh?
I mean, my parents
waiting to slide that one in.
But yeah, like the governor extended the eviction moratorium through mid-October, which is really great. I think it should be extended further, and there is a bill in the State House right now to you know, it's got rent stabilization, it's got support for small landlords, and it also extends the eviction moratorium to 1 year after the emergency declaration, so March 2021. So
essential.
Yeah, super essential, because I know many friends who are moving in September because their lease is up and they don't have a job. So it's kind of like, why stay here if I'm not working? And I know that a good amount of people are going to be in that same place, and I am worried about people being evicted. So anything we can do to stop that is very good.
Yeah. I mean, I think the whole city is going to see this impact widely. We'll see what happens, but Allston in particular is just so concentrated. Had a couple great questions come up in the chat, and one, there's some conversation going on about what Harvard's stake in the neighborhood is right now. And I do want to say we've got some great people from Harvard in the chat who are doing some work answering those questions. But for those folks, we don't have somebody from Harvard on the panel, so we can only sort of speak to what the impact is on the neighborhood end. But Christine, you might have some information exactly on how much of that square footage of development is slotted to Harvard if you wanted to share, and if you don't, that's fine.
I don't think any of that 1.3 million square feet in that chart that I mentioned is Harvard, because most of the things that Harvard is building right now were approved before 2019. And then their upcoming Beacon Yards project that you should definitely keep an eye on is still in the very, very low planning stages. I think they just found an architect end of last year, maybe. So I think that's still very nascent. But if you subscribe to the Boston, the BPDA's website, you can select a neighborhood and subscribe that way. And then you get emails from all of the different projects that get announced in that neighborhood. That's super helpful. I do that. They send you all the information about the various meetings that you can attend, how you can write comments, etc. So definitely recommend doing that. But yeah, like Harvard's engineering school is still being built. They recently opened the art lab, which I don't know if it's open. I've never seen anyone in it. So that's there. Ed Portal's been around for a while. The business school obviously is in Allston, the Harvard Athletic Complex. So they have a good chunk of Lower Allston, and it's going to continue to grow. because they also own a lot of land that isn't specifically Harvard. So like pretty much all of Western Ave is owned by Harvard. So yeah.
So the land along the Charles River where the playing fields are and stuff like that, the Harvard has a 1,000-year lease on that land from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So they'll be there for a while. I mean, Harvard's a complicated thing, but individuals who have been hired through the Ed portal or through other things, I found incredibly responsive. The Harvard Flex Fund, which is their $5 million fund to sort of do things in the community, has been going to the Gardner School and playing fields. I mean, I think it's about speaking up and asking and being there. And I think Harvard, in the bigger picture, how it all happened might be the bad neighbor part. But now that things are rolling, I think they've really been trying to be thoughtful neighbors and support community things in their way. And there's kind of a DMZ that they're not moving, over North Harvard Street. And, there's Harvard has its zone, which for the most part wasn't otherwise being used. It was industrial or something like that. So they haven't really done that much. They haven't done displacement of people per se. Some of that displacement was done before in the 60s and 70s by other developers, but Harvard hasn't been responsible for actual displacement of housing units in a big scale the way some other universities have.
Yeah, I want to agree in that there are individuals from Harvard that have been pretty instrumental in promoting art and culture, and the Harvard Ed portal. I've been working with Falana Brown since I started, who's been amazing at running a winter market back in December. They promote local artists in their gallery. And I've been working with another man, Jim Barrows, who works with the economic development of Harvard to hold economic development workshops, how to apply for grants, how to get your business online, tips for entrepreneurs, all for free. So they've been pretty big about working with the local community. But that being said, they are also, have a big influence in the neighborhood, and they have a big influence in making Lower Allston kind of a less affordable, more expensive neighborhood.
Yeah. When I look at all the things that Harvard provides for the Allston community, I mean, they have job workshops, they have, the daycare things, the Ed portal, all those things. It's like, why can't that happen in Dorchester area? Why, in some ways, models really good community funding of things that is completely lacking in Mattapan, So
we're talking to folks in Mattapan next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that I have some people who live in projects in Dorchester, and I want to send them over to the Ed portal in Allston to get job training. Actually there are some incredible resources there that, in some ways, it'd be better if rather than complaining about what Harvard's doing or not doing, just saying, "Wow, this is great. How can this happen more places in Boston?"
One of my favorite things at the Ed portal is their annual winter market. I've had the pleasure to help them with booking some of the music for it before, and it's great. And I honestly wish it could happen every single week year round, because it's so nice to give artists and craftspeople. They mostly get them from the neighborhood, but I think there are people from outside too. And, they get to sell their stuff. There's food trucks, there's music. I wish that we had something like that in Allston every week, kind of like a SOA or Bow Market. Something like that would be great, because you're taking sort of like craft artists that I feel like are kind of left outside of a lot of artist conversations, because, if it's not a painting, people can sometimes misinterpret it as something that's not art. But I don't know, I come from a family of jewelers, and I think jewelry is art. So, yeah.
I wonder if that's an opportunity to, the city is doing a public plan right now. And I wonder if there's everything is up in the air. I wonder if that's an opportunity to rethink public art, and, craft markets can be part of that.
Yeah, I love Pop Allston so much. I also wish that could have been permanent. It was great to have like a place to go every weekend and be like, oh, I'm going to go shop at the vintage market and check out some band that's playing behind it. Go watch people skateboard because I'm too old to start skateboarding. Just things like that. So,
I mean,
For
interesting
those who
piece
didn't
about
see it, Sarah Rodrigo put a survey in the chat as they're working on this cultural plan and public art.
yeah, I've attended a few of those meetings with Civic Moxie, and they basically are trying to get a feel, kind of similar to this conversation, where they're trying to get a feel of like what they want the future of Allston to look like in terms of public art, and sort of like how we can best support the art and see like what artists in the neighborhood need. So if the survey is still open, definitely take it if you're an artist in the neighborhood or somebody who is supportive of the arts even. So
I mean, interesting thing when you look at what Harvard's done, the winter market or the student projects, and when we've done students, we've always paid students to do artwork and stuff like that. Harvard's approach is often very management intensive because it's a very organized place. But it takes a lot of management, as Kate knows. It takes a lot of management to do these projects, and a lot of other neighborhoods in Boston don't have that management infrastructure to advocate for themselves. Shout out to Kate.
So
Yeah, I see. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, well, I was going to say, I see a question in the chat that says, why do you need to rely on Harvard to create these services? And the answer is we really don't. We do offer technical assistance workshops for local businesses run through AVMS and by the city. We have a Restore program where we provide grants to local businesses to get storefront improvement, get new signs. We worked to hold annual Allston Open Studios, which showcases local artwork in and around the Allston neighborhood. So there are organizations, us and other places, that do offer the same kind of resources that Harvard does. It's just that Harvard can offer them on a much larger scale because they have so many more resources. So it's not a question of we're not doing it because Harvard's doing it, is we are doing it, but Harvard is doing it at a much larger extent.
So that brings me to my last question before we wrap up. And Alex, I'm going to throw it to you first, but then I think we can go around and answer it. And just a couple things, like pick one and share it. But I would love to hear from you, especially Alex, in your position as part of the Main Streets organization, because there are, as Kate mentioned, many Main Streets districts across Boston, and so I'm sure that you are in connection with a lot of the folks who run the other ones. What's something you feel like you can learn from another neighborhood in Boston and that you're trying to bring into Allston or to apply to your model or to apply to your practice? And what's something you feel like Allston has to share, or something that you've learned working specifically in Allston to share with another neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's true, there's 20 Main Street districts in Boston alone, and a dozen more in and around the North Shore area, and hundreds across the country. And when I first started, I leaned pretty heavily on the other Main Street directors that have been there for multiple different years, and they were all super helpful. A lot of what we do is run by one paid employee and then dozens of volunteers. So the biggest thing that I was taught is to expand and maintain a really robust volunteer network, because one person can't do everything. It's up to multiple different people actually each carrying their own, each doing what they said they were going to do, each carrying some weight to get projects off the ground. I've learned that there are multiple ideas that can start in someone's head, but if you don't have the resources and the community support behind you, then it's virtually impossible. So one thing that Allston can teach to other organizations is kind of like how to advocate for your community in terms of large scale development. I know that, you know, the Fenway, Kenmore area has been developed more than Allston, but we are starting to see the development process take place before a lot of these other Main Street districts. So if I could teach another Main Street organization anything, is to get involved, build up a coalition of volunteers and people that are dedicated to the community, and be part of starting the conversation around development and around what you would like your neighborhood to look like.
Christine.
I think a big one for me in another neighborhood is I'm a big fan of Dorchester Art Project, which is a community, they have a venue space, and then they also have artist studio spaces in Fields Corner in Dorchester. And I would love, again, just like gushing about the things that we could have here, I would love something like that in Allston. It's like very community oriented. They give back to their community a lot. They prioritize the immediate community around them by uplifting, you know, Dorchester artists. And they also have a gallery space. I think I missed that when I was originally talking about it. So I love the way that it brings different kinds of art together, because I think one of the hardest things for me is that like a lot of the music and art scenes in Allston are pretty segmented. So even though we're all artists, like we don't, like I, as a music oriented person, don't necessarily know like very many visual artists. Like Ross and I first like met virtually like 2 days ago, and we're both artists. We both live in Lower Allston. So just like things like that, where I love the idea of bringing different kinds of artists together in one place. It's not in Boston, but also the Democracy Center. It's pretty similar. They're a pretty progressive org too. They run most of the shows that they have there are benefit shows that partner with local organizations like Mass Bail Fund or other like pro-immigrant, like anti-police, prison abolition, like those kind of orgs. They have a zine library, just like things like that. Would love to have something like that in Allston that we can learn from other neighborhoods about.
You, Ross, something that you learned?
Well, I feel like I'm in sort of the fortunate world of Allston artists who's been here for a long time. And I think the music scene might be more challenged. I mean, if Great Scott's gone, I mean, I like hold on to the model, you know. But I'm thinking what other neighborhoods really need, because I think if you were to look at the city as a whole, I think at this point, more energy in terms of support for the arts maybe should be going to Dorchester and Mattapan. I'm almost thinking there's kind of like a urban development reparations program, and Allston doesn't need it. You know, other neighborhoods need it more. So, and frankly, you know, okay, so some students lose out. I mean, you know, there are a lot of students who are actually more well-heeled than a lot of people in a lot of neighborhoods who've lived there their whole life. So I'm just not that worried about it. I mean, it's a drag. It's, you know, it's like, I like the way Allston is now, but it's much more painful when you look at the city as a whole to think about other neighborhoods in terms of support. And there's some really great artists and traditional cultural artists and musical artists in lots of neighborhoods who need that, you know, urban development reparations fund for their neighborhood.
Something sticking with me. I like the way Allston is now, but it also isn't working for a lot of people. This conversation has been really enlightening for me, and has reinvigorated the reason that we started these conversations. And Ross, you bring up social sculpture, and I keep thinking maybe this is the new form of social sculpture right now. It's called Zoom. It tires our eyes, but we are making these connections, you know, intergenerational and across, you know, across the city right now. And I just want to remind everyone and myself to show up. You know, we need to take that time, write to our city councilors and, you know, those who represent us, and, you know, say what's on our mind and what we need. So Christine, sorry, Alex and Ross, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom through all of this. I love Allston and hope that it stays funky, but yet becomes more equitable as it develops. So I also want to thank our funders, NEFA's Fund for the Arts and the Boston Foundation for their ongoing support of Now and There, and for generously helping us produce this series. With their support, we can make these recordings available online with closed captioning and also pay each of our participants a living wage. Thank you to all of you joining us today. If you have a few more minutes now, we'd love your feedback on this session. We've put a link, or we will put a link in the survey, to a survey in the chat. We hope you will be able to join us next week, Thursday, July 30th, same time, same place, as we ask the question, what does Mattapan need right now? I think it's going to be a different conversation. We have special guest artists and community leaders, Thuwaba Thazine and Ayana Mack, to talk about the neighborhood of Mattapan. We've dropped a registration link in the chat box to sign up. I hope to see you all there. Continue to see you online, and thank you again for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Down there.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.